Imagine discovering that the person making most of the important decisions in your life is not the person you are today. It's someone you met years ago, someone who may have been embarrassed in a classroom, rejected in a relationship, criticized by a parent, laughed at by friends, ignored in a meeting, defeated in a competition, or disappointed by one painful failure. And somewhere inside that moment, a conclusion was formed. I'm not good enough. I'm not confident. I'm not attractive. I'm bad with money. I'm not a leader. People like me don't succeed. I always mess things up. This is just who I am. Years passed. You grew older. You became wiser. Your circumstances changed. Your abilities changed. Perhaps your entire world changed. But that conclusion quietly came with you. And now, without asking your permission, it may still be deciding which opportunities you notice, which risks you take, how confidently you speak, how much success you tolerate, how you respond to rejection, and even how far you're willing to go. Think about that. What if you're not living according to your actual potential, but according to an outdated picture of who you believe you are? There is a strange pattern in human life. A person desperately wants success, gets close to it, and somehow sabotages it. Someone wants love, but repeatedly chooses relationships that recreate the same pain. Someone knows exactly what they should do, yet keeps procrastinating. Someone receives an extraordinary opportunity and immediately begins thinking, I'm probably not ready. Someone loses weight and gains it back. Someone starts earning more and somehow returns to financial struggle. Someone becomes confident for a while. Then one rejection seems to turn them back into the person they thought they'd escaped. Why? Why do human beings so often return to familiar versions of themselves? Maybe the answer isn't simply motivation. Maybe it isn't discipline. Maybe it isn't intelligence. Maybe there is something deeper, quietly operating underneath all three. Decades ago, a plastic surgeon named Dr. Maxwell Maltz noticed something that changed the direction of his work. He would alter someone's physical appearance, and sometimes something extraordinary happened. The person didn't simply look different. They seemed to become different. A person who had spent years hiding might suddenly become more social. Someone who felt ashamed might begin carrying themselves differently. Confidence could rise, relationships could change, possibilities could appear, where previously there had only been limitations. It seemed almost as though changing the face had changed the life. But then Maltz encountered something far more mysterious. Some patients received successful surgery, looked objectively different, and yet psychologically, nothing changed. The mirror showed a new face, but somewhere inside, they were still seeing the old one. The surgeon had changed the external image, but had failed to change the image inside the mind. And that observation led Maltz toward a powerful idea. Perhaps every human being carries an invisible portrait of themselves, a self-image. And perhaps we don't simply behave according to what we want. We behave according to who we believe we are. This episode is inspired by the groundbreaking ideas explored in Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. But this is not a summary. This is not an audiobook. And we're not going chapter by chapter. This is beyond the book trademark. Because Maltz gave us an extraordinary doorway. Today, we're going to walk through it. We'll connect self-image with psychology, human behavior, mental rehearsal, automatic patterns, attention, emotion, identity, and the strange ways in which the mind can keep pulling us toward what feels familiar, even when we consciously want something better. And somewhere during this journey, you may discover something uncomfortable. Some of the things you've been calling my personality may simply be conclusions you've rehearsed for years. Let me show you how powerful that can become. Imagine two people walking into exactly the same room for exactly the same job interview. Same qualifications, similar intelligence, similar experience. The interviewer asks them the same questions, but the first person enters carrying an invisible sentence: "I belong here." The second enters carrying another: "I hope they don't discover I'm not good enough." Nobody can see those sentences. They're not printed on their CVs. They're not spoken aloud. But watch what happens. One person's shoulders relax. The others tighten. One listens carefully. The other monitors themselves. Am I sounding stupid? Was that answer good enough? Why is she looking at me like that? One person is having a conversation. The other is defending an identity. Same room, same opportunity, two completely different internal realities. And those internal realities begin influencing behavior. Behavior influences response. Response becomes evidence, and evidence strengthens the original belief. The first person leaves thinking, "I handled that well." The second leaves thinking, "I knew I wasn't good at interviews." And the invisible portrait becomes a little stronger. Now take this beyond interviews. Suppose somewhere inside, you believe, "I'm not disciplined." Every time you miss a workout, your mind says, "See? Evidence." You procrastinate once. "See? More evidence." You break one promise. "I knew it." Case closed. But something fascinating happens. When you behave differently, you wake up early, you exercise, you complete the task. For a moment, there's conflicting evidence. And sometimes, instead of updating the identity, the mind dismisses the evidence. That was just today. I was unusually motivated. It won't last. Why? Why would a mind reject evidence of its own improvement? Because human beings don't only seek what is good. We often seek what is consistent with what we already believe. And that may explain one of the strangest experiences in personal transformation. Sometimes, success itself can feel uncomfortable. You enter a bigger room and feel like an imposter. You begin earning more and somehow feel guilty. Someone genuinely loves you, and you start searching for what's wrong. People praise your work, and instead of receiving it, you immediately say, "It wasn't that great." The outside world is offering new evidence, but the internal portrait hasn't caught up yet. Imagine your self-image as an invisible thermostat. You set an air conditioner to 22 degrees. The room becomes warmer. The system notices and begins cooling it. The room becomes colder. The system notices again and adjusts. Its job is not to make the room better. Its job is to return the room to what has been programmed as normal. Now imagine that somewhere inside your mind, there are psychological settings. This much confidence feels like me. This much success feels like me. This much visibility feels like me. This much love feels like me. This much money feels like me. This much achievement feels like me. Move too far below them, and you may work desperately to rise, but move too far above them, and something equally interesting can happen. You may begin unconsciously finding ways to return, not because you consciously want less, but because familiar can sometimes feel safer than better. And if that's true, then perhaps the question, how do I achieve more, is incomplete. A deeper question might be, who would I have to believe I am for that level of life to feel normal? This is where Psycho-Cybernetics becomes much more than a book about positive thinking. Because the deeper territory isn't, think good thoughts and good things will happen. It's far more interesting than that. It's about understanding the internal target toward which your behavior keeps correcting itself. It's about discovering why imagination can influence performance, why repeated mental pictures matter, why mistakes don't have to become identities, why relaxation can sometimes improve performance more than forcing, why your past can become a reference without becoming a prison, and why changing the picture you carry of yourself can begin changing what you notice, what you attempt, how you respond, and eventually, what you repeatedly become. So during this journey, I don't want you to ask only, what habits should I change? We've already gone there. I want you to ask something deeper. What picture of myself has been choosing those habits? Don't ask only, why don't I speak confidently? Ask, what do I believe will happen if I speak confidently? Don't ask only, why do I sabotage success? Ask, what would success force me to believe differently about myself? Don't ask only, why can't I change? Ask, what version of me would have to disappear if I actually did? Because sometimes we aren't afraid of failure. We're afraid of becoming unfamiliar to ourselves. And perhaps that's why you can move to another city, change careers, change relationships, change your appearance, change your routines, change your goals, and still, eventually, meet the same person again. You, or more precisely, the version of you your mind has learned to recognize as me. You can run from circumstances. You can run from people. You can run from places. But there is one person you cannot outrun, the person you believe yourself to be. And until that person changes, the scenery may change, while the story quietly repeats itself. So our journey begins not with changing your life. Not yet. It begins with something much more intimate. We're going to find the invisible portrait that has been hanging inside your mind, perhaps for decades, and ask the question you may never have thought to ask: who painted it? The strange thing about self-image is that you rarely notice it directly. You notice its consequences. You notice the hesitation, the overthinking, the unfinished project, the opportunity you almost took, the compliment you couldn't fully accept, the room you entered and somehow felt smaller inside. But the portrait itself remains invisible. And that is what makes it powerful. Because whatever stays invisible rarely gets questioned. Imagine walking into an art gallery. Hundreds of paintings hang on the walls. You stop in front of one, a portrait. You look at it for a few seconds and move on. But now imagine you've been looking at the same portrait every single day for 30 years. Eventually, you stop seeing the painting. You simply assume that's reality. Self-image works exactly like that. At some point, a picture was formed. Maybe slowly, maybe painfully, maybe accidentally. And after enough repetition, you stopped saying, "I believe I am this." You started saying, "I am this." That difference changes everything, because beliefs can be questioned. Identity often feels like fact. Let's make this personal. Complete this sentence silently. I am the kind of person who. Don't force the answer. Just let the first few words arrive. Maybe. I am the kind of person who overthinks. I am the kind of person who avoids conflict. I am the kind of person who never finishes. I am the kind of person who takes care of everyone. I am the kind of person who can't say no. I am the kind of person who always finds a way. Whatever came up, don't judge it. Just notice it. Because that sentence may be doing far more work in your life than any goal you've written. Here's the uncomfortable part. Your self-image doesn't only affect what you do, it affects what you notice. Imagine two people walking through the same crowded room. One believes, people usually like me. The other believes, people judge me. Same room, same faces, same conversations, but their brains will scan for completely different evidence. The first person notices a smile, a warm hello, an interested question. The second notices someone looking away, two people whispering, a delayed response. Same reality, different filter. And once the filter selects the evidence strengthens the filter. That is how a self-image can become self-confirming. Not because the world is always proving you right, but because your attention becomes trained to notice what fits the picture. This is why one rejection can mean almost nothing to one person and everything to another. For one person, it's an event. For another, it's confirmation. For one person, a failed presentation means that presentation didn't go well. For another, I am terrible at speaking. One sentence describes performance, the other defines identity. And once an event becomes identity, the mind starts protecting it. Think about how labels work. A child is called shy. Again, and again, and again. At first, it's just a word. Then adults begin behaving around the child, as if the label is true. Don't make him speak. He's very shy. He doesn't mix easily. The child begins noticing their own hesitation, more evidence. Soon, the label becomes a story. Then, the story becomes expectation. Then, expectation influences behavior. And years later, an adult says, I've always been shy. Always, or rehearsed. That's a very different question. Now imagine another child. Someone tells her, you ask very good questions. One sentence, nothing dramatic, but she begins noticing. That curiosity gets attention. She asks another question. Someone responds positively. More evidence. The identity starts growing. I am curious. Later, I am a learner. Later, I am someone who figures things out. Same mechanism, different direction. This is why words matter. But not because words are magical, because words can become frames, and frames influence what the mind notices, what it expects, and what it repeats. The self-image is not formed only by what people said to you. Sometimes, the strongest portrait is painted by what happened to you. A business failed, a relationship ended, an exam went badly. Someone betrayed you. You were publicly embarrassed. You made one terrible decision. The event lasted minutes, hours, maybe months, but the meaning can survive for decades. And this is where the mind makes one of its most expensive mistakes. It turns a moment into a definition. One failure becomes, I'm a failure. One rejection becomes, I'm not lovable. One financial loss becomes, I'm bad with money. One difficult season becomes, my life never works out. The event ends. The conclusion remains. And then, the conclusion begins shaping future events. Imagine someone learning to drive. On the third day, they make a mistake. The car stalls at a traffic signal. Cars behind them begin honking. Someone shouts. Their heart races. That night, two very different conclusions are possible. Conclusion 1. I'm learning. That was uncomfortable. Conclusion 2. I'm terrible at driving. Now watch what happens next. The first person returns to practice. The second approaches the car. Already tense. The body tightens. Attention narrows. Performance gets worse. Another mistake happens. And the mind says, "See? I knew it." The original conclusion helped create the evidence that now appears to prove it. This is how self-image can quietly build its own courtroom. The belief is the accusation. Attention becomes the lawyer. Behavior becomes the witness. And every familiar result becomes another exhibit marked proof. But here's the part that changes the conversation. A courtroom can reopen a case, and a mind can update a conclusion, not by pretending the past didn't happen, not by shouting positive affirmations over painful evidence, but by seeing the distinction you may never have been taught to see. There is a difference between what happened and what you decided it meant. That gap is where freedom begins. Maybe you failed. That's an event. Maybe you were rejected. That's an event. Maybe you made a poor decision. That's an event. Maybe someone laughed at you. That's an event. But I am incapable. I am unworthy. I am unlucky. I am weak. Those are not events. Those are interpretations. And interpretations can be rewritten. This doesn't mean lying to yourself. It means becoming more accurate. Suppose you failed at something 5 times. The statement, "I failed 5 times," may be true. The statement, "I always fail," is already an expansion. "I am a failure" is an identity verdict. Watch how quickly the mind moves from fact to generalization to identity. And once you see that movement, you can interrupt it. This is where real self-awareness becomes powerful. Not asking, "What's wrong with me?" but asking, "What conclusion did I form, and is it still useful?" Maybe the conclusion protected you once. Maybe becoming quiet kept you safe. Maybe pleasing everyone reduced conflict. Maybe avoiding risk protected you from embarrassment. Maybe perfectionism earned approval. Maybe anger helped you feel less vulnerable. The mind often builds identities for a reason. But a strategy that protected you at 15 may imprison you at 40. And the mind doesn't automatically update just because time passed. Sometimes you have to update it consciously. Imagine carrying an old ID card. The photograph is 20 years old. The address is wrong. The occupation is outdated. The signature has changed. But every time someone asks, "Who are you?" you keep handing them the same card. Eventually, you begin believing the card is still accurate. Your psychological identity can work the same way. An old document, still being used, long after the person has changed. So perhaps the first step in transformation is not building a new self-image. Not yet. The first step is recognizing the old one, seeing the portrait, reading the label, finding the conclusions, and asking, with curiosity rather than judgment, "Who taught me this? When did I start believing this? What evidence have I been collecting? And what evidence have I been ignoring?" Because sometimes the most important evidence in your life is not the evidence that confirms who you were. It's the evidence your old identity never knew what to do with. The time you were courageous, the time you finished, the time you spoke up, the time you survived, the time you learned, the time you began again, the time you surprised yourself. Those moments matter because every one of them is a crack in the old portrait. And sometimes all transformation needs is enough light to enter through the cracks. There is something strange about human beings. We say we want more success, more confidence, more money, more love, more recognition, more freedom. But sometimes, the moment we begin receiving more, we do something almost impossible to explain. We pull back, we procrastinate, we create conflict, we make a careless decision. We stop doing the very things that were finally working. And then, when everything returns to normal, something inside us almost seems to relax. Why? Why would anyone consciously want a better life and unconsciously behave in ways that take them back to the old one? To understand that, imagine the thermostat in your home. You set the temperature to 22 degrees. The room becomes too warm. The thermostat detects the difference and activates the cooling system. The temperature falls. But suppose the room becomes too cold. The system responds again. Heat returns. Its purpose is simple. Keep the environment close to the programmed setting. The thermostat doesn't ask whether 22 degrees is your highest potential. It doesn't care whether 25 might be better. It simply protects what has been defined as normal. Now imagine that somewhere inside you, there is another thermostat, not for temperature, for identity, a psychological setting, for what feels normal for someone like you. This much confidence feels normal. This much money feels normal. This much attention feels normal. This much love feels normal. This much responsibility feels normal. This much success feels normal. And whenever reality moves too far away from that internal setting, your mind begins trying to restore familiarity. Not deliberately, not because you're foolish, and certainly not because some mysterious force wants you to fail, but because human behavior is deeply influenced by expectation, learning, familiarity, and the internal picture we carry of ourselves. Imagine a salesperson who has spent years earning roughly the same amount every month. Then suddenly, one extraordinary month arrives. Everything works. More calls, more meetings, more sales. Their income doubles. You would imagine they'd become even more focused. Sometimes they do, but sometimes something else happens. They relax too much. Follow-ups get delayed. Small disciplines disappear. Unnecessary expenses appear. Their performance falls until they return, close to the level they already know. From the outside, it looks irrational, but from inside the old identity, normality has been restored. Now imagine someone who has spent years believing, "I'm never the person people choose." Then someone enters their life who genuinely values them. No games, no uncertainty, no chasing, just affection, respect, consistency. You would think this would finally feel wonderful, but sometimes it feels strangely uncomfortable. They begin questioning it. Why does this person like me so much? Something must be wrong. This is too good to be true. They may test the relationship, withdraw, create conflict, interpret neutral behavior negatively, until eventually, the relationship begins resembling the very pattern they already expected. And then the mind whispers, "See, I knew relationships never work for me." The prediction helped create the evidence that now appears to prove the prediction. This is one of the most important distinctions you can make. We don't always move toward what is objectively better. We are often pulled toward what feels psychologically familiar, and familiar can be painful. A person raised around chaos may consciously desire peace, yet initially experience peace as strangely empty. Someone accustomed to criticism may distrust genuine appreciation. Someone who spent decades struggling may feel uncomfortable When life becomes easier, someone accustomed to being invisible may become anxious when suddenly everyone is watching. The conscious mind says, "This is what I wanted." The old self-image says, "But this doesn't feel like me." And that tension can become self-sabotage. Think about a rubber band. Stretch it farther and farther. For a moment, it occupies a completely different position. But release it, and it snaps back. Why? Because temporary force changed its position without changing its resting state. Motivation can sometimes work like that. A seminar stretches you. A book stretches you. A crisis stretches you. A New Year's resolution stretches you. For a few days, perhaps even a few months, you behave differently. But if the internal resting state remains unchanged, the old identity begins pulling, quietly, patiently, until one morning, you realize you're back. This is why temporary performance and permanent transformation are not the same thing. Consider confidence. Someone who thinks of themselves as socially awkward decides to become confident. They learn communication techniques. They improve their posture. They prepare. At an event, everything goes beautifully. People laugh at their stories. Someone compliments them. They connect effortlessly. For a few hours, they experience a different version of themselves. Then they go home. What happens next may determine everything. One possibility is, maybe I'm becoming more confident. The internal setting begins shifting. But another possibility is, I just got lucky tonight. The new evidence is rejected. The old thermostat remains untouched. And that distinction matters, because transformation requires more than producing new experiences. You also have to allow those experiences to update the picture. There is another version of this that appears after failure. Suppose someone secretly believes, I usually mess things up. For 3 months, everything goes well. Then one mistake happens. Suddenly, the mistake receives enormous psychological attention. I knew it. There I am. This is the real me. Notice what happened. 90 days of evidence were treated as exceptions. One mistake was treated as identity. That's not objective accounting. That's an internal thermostat, protecting an old setting. Now consider money. Imagine someone whose entire adult identity has been built around financial struggle. They constantly say, money never stays. I'm just not good with money. Whenever I get ahead, something happens. Then, unexpectedly, their income rises. For the first time, there is surplus. But if their financial behavior and self-image have not evolved with their income, the extra money may disappear. Not necessarily through some dramatic act. Small upgrades, unplanned purchases, generosity they cannot afford, neglected planning, tiny leaks, and eventually, the bank balance looks familiar again. Then comes the sentence, see, money never stays. But perhaps, the more useful question is, what level of financial reality has my identity learned to consider normal? The same mechanism can appear in health, leadership, creativity, relationships, and visibility. A person spends years saying, I want people to notice my work. Then their work finally gets noticed. Thousands of people see it. And suddenly, they stop creating. Why? Because being unseen was frustrating. But being seen is unfamiliar. Visibility brings evaluation, expectation, responsibility, possibility. The old identity may prefer the pain it understands to the possibility it doesn't. And this is where many people misunderstand self-sabotage. They think, some part of me wants to destroy my success. Usually, that's too simplistic. A more useful way to think about it is, some established patterns are trying to preserve consistency. Your brain likes predictions that make sense. Your identity provides a model of what to expect from yourself. When reality contradicts that model, there is tension. Something has to change. Either the self-image updates to accommodate the new reality, or behavior drifts until reality once again matches the old image. And that gives us one of the most important questions in this entire journey. When your life improves, do you allow your identity to improve with it? Imagine being invited into a room you've dreamed of entering for years. Important people, successful people, people whose names you've known long before they knew yours. You walk through the door, and immediately, your old internal thermostat activates. I don't belong here. Everyone is smarter than me. Eventually, they'll discover I'm not supposed to be here. Now notice what happens physically. Your breathing changes. Your voice becomes less natural. You overthink your words. Instead of listening, you monitor yourself. You become hesitant, and eventually, your performance may actually decline. Then you leave with apparent proof. I knew I wasn't ready. But perhaps ability wasn't the primary problem. Perhaps you entered a new room with an old psychological address. Now imagine entering that same room with another internal picture. Not arrogance, not pretending you're superior. Simply, I may have more to learn, but I have every right to learn it here. Same room, same people, same abilities, different internal target. Your shoulders soften. You become curious. You ask better questions. You listen. You connect. And suddenly, the environment begins giving you different evidence. This is how internal and external reality begin shaping each other. So how do we change the thermostat? Not by standing in front of a mirror and shouting, I'm successful, when every part of you rejects the sentence. A thermostat changes when the setting changes. And psychological settings often change through repeated evidence, rehearsal, experience, interpretation, and gradually expanding what feels normal. Suppose speaking to 10 people feels comfortable. Don't begin by demanding that speaking to 10,000 must instantly feel natural. Expand the setting. 10, 20, 50, 100. Each successful experience becomes evidence. Each piece of evidence gives the self-image an opportunity to update. Not, I survived something impossible, but this is becoming something I do. That sentence matters, because the goal isn't simply to perform at a higher level once. The goal is to make the higher level feel increasingly like home. Think about the first time you entered a gym. Perhaps everything felt unfamiliar. The machines, the mirrors, the people. Where do I stand? What do I do? Am I doing this correctly? After months, you walk through the same door without thinking. The environment didn't become less complex. You became familiar with yourself inside that environment. That's transformation. The extraordinary becoming ordinary. The uncomfortable becoming familiar. The new behavior becoming something people like me do. This means when something good begins happening in your life, don't only celebrate the result. Study your reaction to the result. When someone praises you, can you receive it without immediately minimizing yourself? When you earn more, can you manage it like someone capable of keeping and growing it? When responsibility increases, can your self-image expand instead of searching for escape? When you perform well, Can you say, I created evidence today, instead of, I got lucky? When someone loves you well, can you allow healthy love to become familiar? These are not small questions, because sometimes the next level of your life doesn't require more ability. It requires greater psychological permission to remain there. And now, we're approaching an even deeper idea. If a thermostat requires a setting, then what determines the setting? What is the internal target your mind keeps correcting toward? And how does a human being move toward a target without consciously controlling every tiny action? To understand that, we need to leave the thermostat behind and look at something Maxwell Maltz found fascinating. Machines that could make mistakes, measure those mistakes, correct their direction, and still arrive at the destination. Because perhaps you were never supposed to move through life without missing. Perhaps you were designed to miss, correct, learn, and keep moving. Imagine you are standing in complete darkness, holding a bow and arrow. Somewhere in front of you, there's a target. You raise the bow, pull the string, and release. The arrow misses. What does that miss mean? Most people have been conditioned to interpret it emotionally. I'm bad at this. I failed. Maybe I'm not talented. But imagine something very different. Imagine the miss isn't a verdict. It's information. The arrow landed 3 feet to the left. Now you know something you didn't know before you fired. So you adjust. You fire again. This time, 1 foot too high. More information. You adjust again. Miss, correct. Miss, correct. Miss, correct. Until eventually, the arrow reaches the center. Now, ask yourself, at what exact moment did failure become success? Was it only when the arrow finally hit the target? Or was every previous miss already participating in the success? This question takes us directly into one of the most fascinating ideas behind Psycho-Cybernetics. Cybernetics emerged from the study of control, communication, feedback, and goal-directed systems. Maxwell Maltz became fascinated by what these systems could teach us about human behavior. Imagine an early guided mechanism trying to reach a target. It doesn't necessarily travel in one perfectly straight line. It receives information, compares where it is with where it needs to be, detects error, corrects, receives new information, corrects again. The system succeeds, not because it never goes wrong, but because it can use what went wrong. Think about that carefully. A mistake can become part of the guidance system. You already use a version of this principle every day. Imagine driving your car down a long road. You might believe you're holding the steering wheel perfectly straight. You're not. Your hands are constantly making tiny corrections. A little left, a little right, again, again, again. You barely notice them. If someone froze the steering wheel in one exact position, you might eventually drift out of your lane. The journey stays on course because correction never stops. And yet, when it comes to our lives, we expect something completely different. We expect ourselves to choose the perfect career, the perfect partner, the perfect strategy, the perfect business decision, the perfect habit, the perfect answer before moving. We want certainty before experience. But perhaps certainty often comes because of experience. Imagine opening a navigation app. You enter a destination. The system calculates a route. Then, you accidentally take the wrong turn. What does your GPS say? You idiot. You always do this. You clearly weren't born for navigation. give up. Of course not. It simply recalculates. That's all. No shame, no identity crisis, no 20-minute internal argument. Current location, desired destination, new route. Imagine. If your mind learned to respond to mistakes with that kind of intelligence, not, what is wrong with me? But, where am I now? Where am I trying to go? What did this result teach me? And what correction comes next? That single shift could change the emotional architecture of an entire life. Because human beings have a strange tendency. We turn feedback into identity. The presentation didn't go well. Instead of saying, I need to improve my preparation, we say, I'm not a speaker. The business idea fails. Instead of asking, what did the market teach me? We say, I'm not made for business. Someone rejects us. Instead of recognizing one person's decision, we say, I'm not desirable. One exam, one interview, one performance, one mistake, and suddenly, an event becomes a definition. But a goal-seeking mechanism cannot function intelligently if every error destroys the mechanism. It needs error. Error tells it where correction is required. Think about a baby learning to walk. Stand, fall, 2 steps, fall, 3 steps, fall. Imagine the baby, after the 7th fall, sitting on the floor and thinking, I've analyzed the evidence. Walking clearly isn't for me. Absurd. The child hasn't yet learned to convert failure into identity. So the nervous system does what an adaptive system is supposed to do. It learns, balance changes, muscles coordinate, movement adjusts, again, until one day, what once required enormous concentration becomes automatic. Walking, something extraordinary, was built through correction. Now imagine if you approach confidence the same way. You speak. It doesn't go perfectly. Correction. You try again. You notice your breathing. Correction. You learn to pause. Correction. You make eye contact. Correction. You discover that one awkward conversation doesn't mean anything about your worth. Correction. Eventually, the nervous system learns, and what once felt like performance begins feeling like personality. This is where the idea of a servo-mechanism becomes so powerful as a metaphor. A servo-mechanism needs a target. Without a target, there is nothing to correct toward. Imagine telling your navigation system, take me somewhere better. Better where? It needs coordinates. Yet listen to the goals many people give themselves. I don't want to be unsuccessful. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to fail. Those are not clear destinations. They're descriptions of what you're trying to escape. Imagine getting into a taxi and telling the driver, please don't take me to Delhi. The driver looks at you. Then where would you like to go? I told you, not Delhi. You can spend the entire night successfully avoiding Delhi without ever arriving anywhere meaningful. A human mind also needs direction. Not only, what do I want to stop? But, what do I want to move toward? Instead of, I don't want to be nervous during presentations, perhaps the target becomes, I want to speak slowly, stay present, connect with the audience, and communicate one useful idea. Now the system has something to organize around. Instead of, I don't want to waste time. I want to spend the first hour of my morning creating. Instead of, I don't want another unhealthy relationship. I want a relationship where honesty, respect, affection, and boundaries feel normal. Notice the difference. One mind is running from an image. The other is moving toward one. But something else happens. When a target becomes clear, your attention begins changing. Imagine deciding that you want to buy a particular model of car. Suddenly, you start seeing that car everywhere. It was always there, but now it has relevance. A meaningful target can change what information your mind notices. Opportunities that previously looked irrelevant begin standing out. Conversations acquire new meaning. Resources become visible. Ideas connect. Not because reality magically rearranged itself, but because your attention now has a question to answer. And this is where we need an important distinction. The human mind is not literally a mechanical missile or a household thermostat. Human beings are vastly more complex. We have emotion, memory, social context, conscious reflection, biology, culture, and choice. The value of cybernetics here is not pretending that a person is a machine. The value is understanding the principle of goal, feedback, and correction. Because once you understand that principle, you begin relating differently to error. Now, imagine a professional golfer. They've practiced a particular swing thousands of times. Their body knows the movement. Then, during an important competition, they begin consciously controlling every tiny detail. Keep the elbow here. Move the wrist. Don't rotate too early. Don't miss. Suddenly, a movement that once flowed naturally becomes stiff. Why? Because sometimes conscious interference can disrupt a well-learned automatic process. You've probably experienced this. Someone asks, "How exactly do you tie your shoelaces?" Suddenly, you have to think about something you normally do effortlessly, or you're walking normally, until you become intensely aware of how you're moving your arms. And for a few seconds, walking feels strange. Some actions become effective precisely because the nervous system has learned to execute them without constant conscious supervision. This doesn't mean don't think. It means there is a time for conscious preparation and a time for execution. Prepare consciously, practice consciously, learn consciously, set the direction consciously. Then, at some point, allow the trained system to perform. This is especially important under pressure. The speaker who thinks, "What will they think of me?" is no longer fully communicating. Part of their attention has turned inward. The athlete who thinks, "Don't make a mistake," may begin consciously interfering with movements trained through thousands of repetitions. The musician who suddenly monitors every finger can lose the music. The conversation becomes difficult when you're simultaneously talking and evaluating yourself talking. Sometimes, better performance begins when you stop watching yourself perform. You move attention from self-consciousness to purpose, from "How am I looking?" to "What am I communicating?" from "Will I win?" to "What does this moment require?" from "Don't fail" to "Find the target." Imagine an archer. The target is visible. The bow is ready. The body has practiced. At some point, the archer must release. You cannot guide an arrow by holding onto the string forever. And perhaps many people live exactly like that, preparing, planning, thinking, reconsidering, perfecting, waiting, holding, holding, holding. Because releasing creates the possibility of missing. But without release, there can be no feedback. And without feedback, there can be no correction. And without correction, there can be no mastery. This gives us a completely different relationship with action. Your first attempt doesn't need to prove your ability. It needs to produce information. Your first video doesn't have to become viral. It teaches you how viewers respond. Your first business idea doesn't have to build an empire. It teaches you what customers value. Your first difficult conversation doesn't have to be perfect. It teaches you where your emotional patterns appear. Your first attempt is not the final examination. It is data. And once you begin seeing life this way, perfectionism starts losing some of its power. Perfectionism says, I must know before I begin. A learning system says, I will know more because I begin. Perfectionism says, a mistake means something about me. A feedback system says, a mistake tells me something about the approach. Perfectionism freezes. Feedback moves. There is another beautiful implication. You don't always need to know the entire route. Imagine driving at night. Your headlights may illuminate only a limited distance ahead, yet you can travel hundreds of kilometers. You don't need the entire road illuminated before leaving home. You need enough visibility for the next correction. This matters because people often postpone their lives, waiting for complete certainty. I'll begin when I know exactly how. I'll change careers when I can guarantee it'll work. I'll create when I know people will like it. I'll speak when I know I won't be judged. But life rarely offers that kind of certainty. Direction often comes first. Clarity grows through movement. Think again about the GPS. It doesn't need to know what emotional state you were in when you missed the turn. It doesn't spend 10 minutes analyzing your childhood. For navigation, it needs 2 pieces of information. Where are you? Where are you going? Then, it begins correcting. There are times when understanding the past matters deeply, but there are also times when endless explanation becomes another form of standing still. Sometimes, the next useful question is simply, given where I am now, what is the next intelligent move? Now, return to the invisible portrait we discovered earlier. If your self-image acts like an internal target, then every day, your thoughts, expectations, attention, and behavior may be correcting toward that picture, which means the quality of the target matters enormously. If the internal target says, I am someone who always fails, the mind may repeatedly interpret experience through that destination. If the target says, I am someone learning how to handle difficult things, the same mistake can produce a completely different correction. Same event, different destination, different meaning, different next move. And now, we arrive at an extraordinary possibility. What if, before entering the real situation, you could begin giving your mind a clearer target? Before the presentation, what if you could rehearse calmness? Before the conversation, what if you could mentally experience listening, responding, and staying centered? Before stepping onto the field, what if the athlete could repeatedly experience the movement before physically performing it, before becoming the person you want to become? What if you could begin introducing your nervous system to that person? Not through fantasy, not through magical thinking, but through mental rehearsal. Because the brain has another fascinating characteristic. What you vividly imagine can influence what you expect, what you notice, how your body prepares, and how you respond. And that takes us into a theater that has been running inside your mind your entire life. The question is, what movie have you been rehearsing? Before anything happens in the outside world, something often happens first, inside. A conversation, a picture, a prediction, a rehearsal. You imagine the meeting going badly before you enter the room. You imagine forgetting your words before you step onto the stage. You imagine rejection before you ask. You imagine failure before you begin. And by the time reality arrives, your nervous system has already practiced the experience. Think about that. The event may not have happened yet, but your body has already started responding to the version of the event your mind created. Imagine you're lying in bed at night. The room is quiet. Nothing dangerous is happening. Yet suddenly, you remember tomorrow's presentation. Within seconds, your heartbeat changes, your breathing changes, your stomach tightens. Your body begins preparing for something that exists only in imagination. The presentation is tomorrow. The stress is happening now. Why? Because the nervous system doesn't wait for reality to become physical before it begins preparing. Expectation matters, prediction matters, mental imagery matters, and that means the theater inside your mind is not simply entertainment, it is rehearsal. Now be careful here. This does not mean that imagination magically controls the universe. It doesn't mean you imagine success and success automatically arrives. It doesn't mean you sit on a sofa, visualize a championship, and somehow become a champion. That is fantasy. What we're talking about is something much more grounded. Your imagination can influence what your brain expects, what your attention notices, how your body prepares, how emotionally familiar a situation feels, and how you behave when the real moment arrives. That is powerful enough. Think about an athlete. Before a race, a skier may mentally travel through the course. A gymnast can rehearse a sequence. A golfer may picture the shot. A speaker can rehearse entering the room, standing confidently, pausing, delivering the opening line, and handling silence. Why? Because when a movement or situation has been mentally rehearsed, the real event can feel slightly less unfamiliar. And remember, the nervous system pays close attention to familiarity. Let's make this practical. Imagine two people who must deliver the same presentation tomorrow morning. Both are equally qualified. Both have prepared the same slides. Both know the material. The first person spends the evening imagining everything that could go wrong. What if I forget? What if they ask something I can't answer? What if everyone thinks I'm boring? What if my voice shakes? They replay these scenes again and again. Now notice, what exactly are they practicing? Not the presentation, failure. Their mind is creating a detailed simulation of the very state they don't want. By morning, the body already knows the script. Fast breathing, tight chest, self-monitoring, fear. Now the second person does something different. They don't imagine perfection. They imagine process. Walking into the room, breathing, looking at one person, beginning slowly, forgetting one sentence, and recovering calmly, receiving a difficult question, and pausing before answering. They rehearse, not a flawless performance, but a capable response. That's different. One person rehearses catastrophe. The other rehearses adaptability. And adaptability is much more useful than perfection. This distinction matters enormously. When people first hear about visualization, they often imagine seeing themselves winning, standing on a stage, holding a trophy, receiving applause. That may feel good, but there is another kind of rehearsal that can be far more valuable. Rehearse the behavior that makes success possible. Don't only imagine being fit. Imagine putting on the shoes, leaving the house, beginning the workout. On the day you don't feel motivated, don't only imagine becoming financially secure. Imagine opening the account, reviewing the numbers, saying no to one unnecessary purchase, making one thoughtful decision. Don't only imagine being confident. Imagine the exact moment someone disagrees with you and you remain present. That is rehearsal with teeth. There is something else the imagination does. It creates emotional familiarity. Suppose you've never spoken in front of 1,000 people. To your nervous system, that scene may represent pure uncertainty. But if you repeatedly rehearse the room, the lights, the faces, your first sentence, the pause, your breathing, the feeling of standing there, then something subtle can happen. The mind has a reference, not the same as real experience, but not complete novelty either. The unknown has been introduced. Think about visiting a city for the very first time. Everything feels unfamiliar. The roads, the buildings, the turns. Now suppose, before traveling, you studied the map, watched videos, looked at photographs, and mentally traced the route. When you finally arrive, you may still be new, but not completely lost. Mental rehearsal can work in a similar way. It doesn't replace reality. It prepares you to meet reality. Now let's go deeper. Imagine someone who has failed repeatedly in relationships. Every time they meet someone new, they already begin anticipating the ending. They'll leave eventually. This won't last. I shouldn't trust too much. Notice what happens. That imagined future changes present behavior. They become guarded, less open, more suspicious. They interpret uncertainty as warning. Their behavior affects the relationship, and eventually, the relationship may deteriorate. Then the mind says, I knew it. The imagination didn't magically predict the future. It helped shape the behavior that influenced it. This is why internal movies matter. They don't control reality, but they influence how you enter reality. Now remember the invisible portrait from earlier. Suppose someone carries a self-image of being not confident. When they imagine tomorrow, what kind of scenes do you think their mind naturally generates? Scenes consistent with the portrait: embarrassment, hesitation, mistakes, rejection. The self-image directs the imagination. Then the imagination prepares the nervous system. Then behavior produces evidence. And the evidence strengthens the self-image. A loop. Picture, expectation, state, behavior, evidence, picture, again, again, again. And that means, if we want to rebuild identity, we cannot ignore the internal cinema. Let me give you an experiment. Think about a lemon, a fresh lemon, bright yellow, cool in your hand. Imagine cutting it slowly. See the juice on the knife. Now imagine lifting one half toward your mouth. Smell it. Then bite directly into the lemon. Notice your body. Maybe your mouth produced saliva. Maybe your jaw tightened. Maybe you almost tasted something that wasn't physically there. The lemon existed, only as an image, yet the body responded. Again. This doesn't prove that imagination is reality. It proves that imagined experience can create real physiological response. And if one imagined lemon can influence your mouth, imagine what years of imagined rejection, failure, danger, or inadequacy might be doing to your emotional state. Many people are practicing their worst future every single day. They call it worry. Worry is often negative mental rehearsal. A conversation hasn't happened, but you rehearse the fight. The result hasn't arrived, but you rehearse disappointment. The doctor hasn't said anything, but you rehearse disaster. The client hasn't rejected you, but you rehearse rejection again, again, again. And because rehearsal creates familiarity, the mind becomes highly skilled at entering the emotional state you repeatedly practice. Now imagine using the same capacity more deliberately, not to deny risk, not to pretend everything will be wonderful, but to rehearse resourcefulness. If this becomes difficult, how do I want to respond? If I feel nervous, how do I want to breathe? If someone criticizes me, what kind of person do I want to be in that moment? If the plan fails, how do I want to recover? Now the imagination isn't creating fantasy, it's training choice. This is particularly powerful when you rehearse from inside the experience. Don't only watch yourself like a movie star from somewhere outside your body. Sometimes, step into the scene, see through your own eyes, hear what you would hear, feel your feet on the floor, notice your breathing, sense the posture, hear your own voice, speaking slowly. Let the body become familiar with the state, because behavior is not only cognitive, it is embodied. And now, remember something important. If the scene feels impossible, your nervous system may reject it. Suppose someone who has never spoken publicly imagines themselves addressing 50,000 people with complete mastery, perhaps inspiring, perhaps too distant. Instead, create a believable bridge. 5 people, then 20, then 50, then a meeting, then a stage. The goal is not to impress your imagination. The goal is to make the emerging identity increasingly familiar. This is why a future self can be useful only when it has behavioral detail. I want to become successful is vague. How does that person walk into Monday morning? How do they use the first hour? How do they respond when things don't go their way? How do they speak when nobody agrees? How do they make decisions when tired? How do they behave when nobody is watching? Now, you have something the mind can rehearse. Imagine a theater, empty seats, dark room, one screen. You enter alone. On that screen, your mind has been playing movies your entire life. Some were given to you by experience, some by fear, some by parents, some by embarrassment, some by hope, some by old memories. And perhaps you never realized that you were both the audience and the director. You may not control every image that appears, but you can begin choosing which ones deserve rehearsal. Now let's take this into a difficult conversation. Someone in your life needs to hear something honest. Normally, you avoid it because your internal movie says, they'll get angry. It'll become a fight. I won't know what to say. So you delay. Days become weeks. Now, sit quietly. Imagine the conversation, not them suddenly becoming perfect. You becoming centered. You begin respectfully. You say what needs to be said. They react. Perhaps they disagree. You breathe. You don't immediately defend. You listen. You respond. You maintain dignity. Again. Rehearse it. Again. The goal isn't to control them. You cannot. The goal is to train your own response inside uncertainty. That's where mental rehearsal becomes psychologically mature. The same can be done before an interview, before competition, before a sales meeting, before filming a video, before asking for something, before saying no, before entering the room that once intimidated you. You're not trying to guarantee an outcome. You're reducing novelty and rehearsing the person you want to bring into the outcome. And now, we discover something subtle. The brain is always rehearsing anyway. The question is not, should I visualize? The question is, what am I already visualizing? Every expectation contains imagery. Every worry contains rehearsal. Every memory can become rehearsal. Every identity creates future predictions. So perhaps deliberate imagination isn't adding something artificial. It's becoming conscious of a process that was already happening. Now consider the person who repeatedly says, "Things always go wrong for me." Ask them to imagine a future opportunity. Watch closely. Often, the mind immediately generates what might go wrong. Why? Because imagination is being recruited by identity. That is why changing imagery without touching self-image may not be enough. And changing self-image without changing repeated imagery may also leave the old emotional world intact. The two interact. This gives us a powerful practice. Before sleep, choose one situation that matters tomorrow. Only one. Close your eyes, relax the body, then rehearse the response you want. Not the applause, not the trophy, the response. See it, hear it, feel it. Allow one complication to enter the scene, then rehearse handling that too. The nervous system learns, not only, this can go well, but even if something goes wrong, I can remain capable. That's a very different kind of confidence. Confidence no longer means, I know nothing bad will happen. Confidence begins meaning, I trust myself to respond. And perhaps that is one reason imagination can be so transformational. It allows us to experience a possible self before that self has accumulated enough external history to feel obvious. The mind gets a preview. The body receives a rehearsal. Attention receives a target. And behavior receives a direction. But there is a darker side to this same mechanism. Because if imagination can rehearse capability, it can also rehearse helplessness. If self-image can create a useful target, it can also organize behavior around failure. And Maxwell Maltz identified patterns that begin appearing when a person repeatedly operates from frustration, insecurity, resentment, uncertainty, and emotional defeat, not because they were born as failures, but because over time, a failure pattern can become a familiar way of operating. And that is where we need to go next. There is a dangerous moment that often comes after repeated disappointment. At first, you fail at something. Then you fail again. Then again. And slowly, almost invisibly, the mind stops saying, "This didn't work." It starts saying, "Maybe I don't work." That shift from event to identity is where failure becomes far more powerful than it deserves to be. Because one failed attempt is information, but a failure identity becomes an operating system. Imagine a man trying to open a locked door. He pushes once, nothing. Pushes harder, nothing. Again, nothing. Eventually, frustration rises. He begins kicking the door, shouting, blaming the lock, blaming himself. Then, someone quietly walks over, turns the handle, and opens it. The door was never locked. The strategy was wrong. This is what frustration often does. It narrows attention. The harder we push, the less we question the approach. We assume more force must produce a better result. More effort, more pressure, more urgency. But sometimes, what you need is not more force. It's a different direction. Frustration becomes dangerous when repeated effort, without adaptation, starts creating emotional exhaustion. A person works harder, but thinks less clearly, pushes more, but learns less. And eventually, the nervous system begins associating the goal itself with pain. Now the project feels heavy. The conversation feels threatening. The challenge feels personal, and the mind begins protecting itself by avoiding the very thing it once wanted. Then comes insecurity. Insecurity doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like over-preparation, over-explaining, constant comparison, needing approval, avoiding decisions, seeking reassurance, trying to control every variable because uncertainty feels dangerous. Imagine standing on a stage while simultaneously watching yourself from the audience. How do I look? Did that sound intelligent? Do they like me? Now you're no longer speaking, you're monitoring. And the more you monitor, the less natural you become. Insecurity turns attention away from the task and toward the self. The speaker stops communicating. The leader stops listening. The athlete stops performing. The person begins protecting an image instead of engaging with reality. And then there is uncertainty. Uncertainty itself is not the problem. Life is uncertain, always has been. The problem begins when the mind decides uncertainty means danger. Then every decision becomes exhausting. What if this is wrong? What if I regret it? What if there's a better option? What if people disagree? The person keeps gathering information long after enough information already exists. They call it careful thinking. Sometimes it's simply fear wearing a suit. Now consider resentment. Resentment is fascinating because resentment often begins with a story of unfairness. I deserved better. They shouldn't have treated me like that. After everything I did, maybe those statements are valid. Maybe something genuinely unfair happened. But if resentment becomes rehearsed, again and again, the mind continues living inside an event that has already ended. The person who hurt you may have moved on, but every morning, your nervous system replays the courtroom. Same evidence, same argument, same anger, same verdict. And each rehearsal keeps the emotional wound psychologically current. Resentment can become a strange form of attachment. You remain connected to what you claim you want to leave behind. Then there is loneliness, and loneliness is not always the absence of people. Some of the loneliest people are surrounded by hundreds, because loneliness can also mean the inability to feel safely known. A person fears rejection, so they hide parts of themselves. Then they feel, nobody really knows me, but nobody can know what is never revealed. The fear of disconnection creates behavior that deepens disconnection. Again, a loop. And then something even quieter can appear. Emptiness. A person achieves, accomplishes, earns, collects, wins. Yet something remains missing. Why? Because achievement can solve external problems without answering internal questions. What am I doing this for? Who am I when nobody applauds? What actually matters to me? If direction is borrowed from society, family, comparison, or ego, success can arrive without meaning, and success without meaning can feel surprisingly empty. This is why the failure mechanism is not simply people fail. It's much deeper. It's a cluster of patterns that begin feeding one another. Frustration creates tension. Tension narrows thinking. Insecurity creates self-monitoring. Self-monitoring reduces natural performance. Uncertainty delays action. Delayed action creates more doubt. Resentment keeps attention trapped in the past. Loneliness reduces connection. Emptiness removes direction. And slowly, the person begins collecting evidence that life is not working. Then the identity updates. Maybe this is just who I am. That's the dangerous moment. Because once failure becomes identity, the mind stops treating problems as temporary. It begins treating them as personal. A failed business becomes, I am bad at business. A broken relationship becomes, I am impossible to love. A poor performance becomes, I can't handle pressure. A mistake becomes, this is what I always do. And remember, once identity forms, attention begins searching for confirmation. Now every setback gets highlighted. Every success gets discounted. The psychological accountant is no longer neutral. Imagine two folders inside your mind. One is labeled, evidence that I can. The other, evidence that I can't. Every day, life gives you material for both. But self-image decides which folder receives attention. Someone compliments your work. You say, they were just being polite. Rejected. Someone criticizes you once. You replay it for 3 days. Filed. You succeed 10 times. Nothing special. Discarded. You make one mistake. There it is. Filed. After years, one folder becomes enormous. Then you open it and say, look at all the proof. But who was doing the filing? This is where awareness matters. Not positive thinking, accurate thinking. If you fail, say, I failed. Don't add, because I am a failure. If you feel insecure, say, I feel insecure in this situation. Don't automatically conclude, I am an insecure person. If you're uncertain, say, I don't yet know. That sentence is very different from, I am incapable of knowing. Language matters because language can freeze temporary states into permanent identities. Now ask yourself, where in your life have you turned a temporary state into a permanent self-description? I am anxious. I am lazy. I am unlucky. I am terrible with people. I am not creative. I am not disciplined. What if some of those sentences are not identities at all? What if they're simply patterns that have been repeated long enough to sound like identity? And if they were learned, perhaps they can be unlearned. This does not mean ignoring pain. It doesn't mean pretending failure never happened. It means using failure for what it is best suited for. Feedback. Remember the servo-mechanism. Error can guide correction, but only if error remains information. The moment error becomes identity, learning slows down. Because now, instead of adjusting the strategy, You begin attacking the self, and a person under attack rarely learns well. Imagine teaching a child to ride a bicycle. They fall. You could say, "You are terrible at this," or "You lean too far left." One statement defines the person. The other describes the adjustment. Which one creates learning? The same is true for adults. "I am bad at relationships" is useless. "I avoid difficult conversations until resentment builds" is useful. "I am bad with money" is vague. "I don't track spending and I make emotional purchases when stressed" is actionable. "I have no discipline" is identity. "I make my desired behavior too difficult to start" is design. Specificity returns power. And now, something begins changing. The moment you stop saying, "This is who I am," and begin asking, "What pattern is operating here?" Distance appears, and distance creates choice. You become the observer of the mechanism, not its prisoner. Think about a pilot. A warning light appears. The pilot doesn't scream, "I am a terrible aircraft." They read the signal, identify the system, correct the issue. Failure indicators are meant to guide, not humiliate. Perhaps frustration is telling you your strategy needs adjustment. Perhaps insecurity is showing you where your self-image needs evidence. Perhaps uncertainty is asking for one courageous decision. Perhaps resentment is showing you what you still haven't emotionally released. Perhaps loneliness is inviting authenticity. Perhaps emptiness is asking, whose definition of success have you been living? The same states that once looked like enemies can become information. And when information replaces shame, something extraordinary happens. Failure loses its finality. You stop asking, "What does this prove about me?" and begin asking, "What does this teach me?" That one question changes the direction of the entire mechanism. Because now, failure no longer points toward a dead end. It points toward correction. But correcting away from failure is only half the journey. A goal-seeking system cannot live forever by avoiding what it doesn't want. It needs a direction, a psychological target, a way of operating that moves toward something meaningful. And Maxwell Maltz described another pattern, the opposite of the failure mechanism. Not perfection, not constant winning, something much more practical. A success mechanism, a way of moving with direction, understanding, courage, self-respect, and acceptance. And perhaps the most surprising part is that success may begin long before the world can see it. What does success actually feel like before anyone else can see it? Not the trophy, not the promotion, not the applause, not the bank balance. What happens inside a person before the outer result appears? Because success is not only an outcome, it is also a way of operating, a way of thinking, a way of responding, a way of moving through uncertainty without constantly collapsing back into self-doubt. And that is where the idea of a success mechanism becomes interesting. Imagine two people standing at the bottom of the same mountain, same weather, same distance, same difficulty. The first person looks up and immediately thinks, "What if I can't do this?" The second looks up and asks, "What is the next step?" Same mountain, different internal direction. One mind is measuring the distance to failure. The other is searching for movement. And sometimes that difference is enough to change the entire journey. Direction matters, perhaps more than speed. A ship moving slowly toward the right harbor is still making progress. A ship moving quickly in the wrong direction is simply getting lost faster. Yet modern life has taught us to worship speed. How fast did you grow? How quickly did you succeed? How soon did you achieve? But speed without direction can become another form of distraction. This is why one of the healthiest questions you can ask yourself is not, how quickly am I progressing? But, am I still moving toward the person I actually want to become? A sense of direction does something powerful to the mind. It organizes attention. It reduces noise. It helps you distinguish between what matters and what merely feels urgent. Imagine standing in a crowded railway station. Hundreds of people, announcements, noise, movement. If you don't know which train you're taking, everything feels chaotic. The moment you know, Platform 4, Train 129, destination there, the same station, becomes easier to navigate. Nothing outside changed. Direction changed. What mattered? And that is what meaningful direction can do for a human life. But direction alone isn't enough. Because if you misunderstand reality, you can move confidently in the wrong direction. That brings us to understanding, not intelligence. Understanding. The ability to see what is actually happening instead of what your fear, ego, or old identity wants you to believe is happening. Imagine receiving criticism. Without understanding, the mind may hear, "You are not good enough." With understanding, you may hear, "One part of your work needs improvement." Same words, different interpretation. One damages identity, the other improves performance. Understanding creates emotional space. It allows you to separate fact from meaning, event from identity, feedback from rejection, delay from defeat. That distinction is one of the foundations of psychological maturity. Then comes courage, and courage is often misunderstood. People imagine courage as the absence of fear, but if fear were absent, courage would not be required. Courage exists because fear is present, and movement happens anyway. Imagine a person walking into a difficult conversation. Their heart is beating faster. They are uncomfortable. They would rather postpone it, but they go. That is courage. Not because they felt powerful, because they acted without waiting to feel powerful. This matters because many people are waiting for confidence before action. But confidence often comes after action. You speak once, you survive, you speak again, you handle it better, you receive evidence, and gradually, the mind begins saying, "Perhaps we can do this." Confidence is not always the starting fuel. Sometimes it is the exhaust produced by courageous movement. Now think about self-confidence. Not arrogance, not pretending, not believing you are always right. Real self-confidence is much quieter. It sounds like, "I may not know everything, but I trust myself to learn. I may make a mistake, but I trust myself to correct. I may be rejected, but I trust myself to remain whole. I may fail, but I trust myself to return." That kind of confidence doesn't depend on every result going your way. It depends on your relationship with yourself when it doesn't. Imagine two climbers. One says, "I know I will never slip." The other says, "If I slip, I know how to regain my footing." Who is actually safer? The second. Certainty about outcomes is fragile. Trust in recovery is stronger. Now we arrive at self-respect. Self-respect is not ego. It is not superiority. It is the quiet refusal to repeatedly betray your own values. Every time you keep a meaningful promise to yourself, self-respect grows. Every time you tell the truth, when lying would be easier, it grows. Every time you set a boundary that protects something important, it grows. Every time you return after drifting, it grows. Self-respect is accumulated alignment. And this is why someone can have enormous external success and still feel internally weak. They may have achievements without alignment, recognition without integrity, status without self-respect. The outside looks powerful. The inside knows the truth. Then comes something even deeper, self-acceptance. And this is one of the most misunderstood ideas in personal development. People hear, accept yourself, and think it means stop improving. It doesn't. Self-acceptance means you stop using self-rejection as your primary strategy for growth. Think about the difference. One person says, I hate who I am, so I must change. Another says, I accept where I am, and I choose to grow. Both may take action, but the emotional fuel is completely different. One moves from shame, the other from responsibility. Shame says, you are the problem. Acceptance says, there is a pattern here, and I can work with it. Shame freezes identity. Acceptance creates room for change. Imagine a coach working with an athlete. After a poor performance, the coach has two options. Option 1, you are useless. Option 2, your timing was late, your attention dropped, and we need to work on recovery. Which coach creates learning? Now ask yourself, which coach lives inside your own head? Because the voice you repeatedly use with yourself can either support adaptation or make every mistake feel like evidence that you were never good enough. A healthy success mechanism does not require constant positivity. It requires accuracy, direction, courage, self-respect, and the ability to accept the current self without surrendering the future self. There is also something powerful about concern for others. A person completely trapped in self-consciousness becomes psychologically small. What do they think of me? How do I look? Am I impressive? Did I sound intelligent? Attention keeps circling around the self, but something changes when attention expands. How can I help? What does this person need? What value can I create? What does this moment require? Suddenly, self-consciousness has less oxygen. The speaker becomes more effective when they stop trying to look impressive and start trying to be useful. The leader becomes stronger when they stop protecting status and start serving the system. The conversation becomes warmer when you stop asking, do they like me? And begin asking, am I genuinely listening? Sometimes, confidence grows when the self stops being the center of every scene. Imagine a surgeon in the middle of an operation. If they constantly think, do I look competent? They lose attention. Their effectiveness depends on becoming absorbed in the task. This is true far beyond surgery. Peak functioning often contains less self-monitoring and more engagement. You become so involved in what matters that for a while, you stop performing an identity and simply act. Now consider direction again. What if your goal isn't be successful Too vague. Success in what? For what? At what cost? By whose definition? A clearer direction might be, I want to build work that creates value while preserving my health, relationships, and integrity. Now, the target has structure. That structure can guide correction. This is why borrowed goals are dangerous. You can become extremely effective at climbing the wrong mountain, then reach the top and discover you don't even want the view. A healthy success mechanism needs a target that belongs to you, not one inherited from comparison, not one chosen to impress people, not one borrowed from social media. A target that makes psychological sense for the life you actually want to live. Take a moment, ask yourself, what are you moving toward right now? Not what you're escaping, not what you're supposed to want. What are you actually moving toward? And if you achieved it, who would you become along the way? Would you respect that person? Would you recognize them? Would you enjoy living inside their mind? That question matters because every goal has two outcomes: what you get and what you become while getting it. Sometimes the second outcome is far more important. Now imagine a person whose internal direction is clear. They understand that mistakes are feedback. They act despite fear. They respect themselves enough to keep meaningful promises. They accept that imperfection does not cancel worth. They stop turning every difficult moment into an identity verdict. What happens? The person becomes more adaptive, more resilient, more available to reality. That is a success mechanism, not a machine that guarantees victory, a psychological way of operating that improves the probability of intelligent movement. And perhaps this is the deepest shift from the failure mechanism to the success mechanism. Failure mechanism asks, what does this prove about me? Success mechanism asks, what can I learn from this? Failure mechanism says, I need certainty. Success mechanism says, I need direction. Failure mechanism says, I must feel confident first. Success mechanism says, I can move and allow confidence to catch up. Failure mechanism says, my mistake defines me. Success mechanism says, my correction develops me. Failure mechanism protects the old portrait. Success mechanism allows the portrait to evolve. But how do we accelerate that evolution? How do we help a new way of operating feel more familiar before life has given us years of evidence? This is where the theater inside your mind becomes practical, not imagination as escape, imagination as rehearsal. A place where, before the real moment arrives, you begin practicing the person you want to bring into it. And that is where we go next. There is a theater you have visited more times than any theater in the world. No ticket was ever required, no curtain ever officially opened, and yet, almost every important moment of your life has appeared there. Sometimes before it happened, sometimes after it happened, sometimes thousands of times, even though it never happened at all. That theater is inside your mind, and every day, whether you realize it or not, you are rehearsing there. Think about tomorrow. Perhaps there is a meeting, a conversation, a decision, a presentation, something important. Now notice what your mind does automatically. It creates scenes. You see someone's face. You hear their possible response. You imagine what you'll say. You anticipate what could go wrong. Perhaps you even feel an emotion about an event that hasn't happened yet. Nothing has occurred in the outside world, yet inside, the rehearsal has already begun. Maxwell Maltz understood that this internal theater could become extraordinarily important, because if the mind is going to rehearse anyway, then perhaps we can become more conscious about what it rehearses. Imagine a young executive who has been asked to address the senior leadership team. She's capable, prepared, she knows the subject, but every night, she enters her internal theater without realizing it. She sees herself standing there. Someone asks a difficult question. Her mind goes blank. Someone looks unimpressed. Her voice shakes. People exchange glances. She leaves embarrassed. Again, the movie plays. Again. By the morning of the presentation, she has already experienced failure, perhaps 50 times, not in reality, in rehearsal. Then she walks into the actual room, and her body recognizes the scene. Heart faster, shoulders tighter, breathing shallower. Attention turns inward. Is my voice shaking? Do I look nervous? What are they thinking? And the rehearsal begins influencing the performance. Now imagine, she had used the same theater differently, not to imagine herself receiving a standing ovation, not to create some perfect fantasy, something much more useful. She sits quietly, allows the body to become comfortable. Breathing slows, muscles soften. Then, she imagines entering the room, not as a superhero, as herself. She feels her feet touching the floor, notices the temperature of the room, sees the table, the screen, the faces. She hears the slight movement of chairs. Then she begins. Slowly, clearly, she imagines herself pausing, breathing, making eye contact. Then, something goes wrong. A senior executive interrupts. A difficult question. The old movie would have ended there. But this time, she continues. She pauses, listens, doesn't rush, and calmly says, "That's an important question. Let me think about it for a moment." She breathes, then responds. The rehearsal isn't teaching her that nothing difficult will happen. It's teaching her that difficulty does not require collapse. That distinction changes everything. Because the most powerful mental rehearsal isn't necessarily rehearsing success. It is rehearsing resourcefulness. If something unexpected happens, who do you become? If someone disagrees, who do you become? If your plan fails, who do you become? If your heart begins racing, who do you become? If you forget one line, who do you become in the next 5 seconds? That is the person worth rehearsing. Think of a pilot inside a flight simulator. The purpose of the simulator is not to repeatedly show perfect blue skies. Engines fail, weather changes, visibility drops, unexpected conditions appear. Why? Because competence is not knowing that everything will go perfectly. Competence is having a trained response when it doesn't. Your internal theater can become something similar, a simulator for your emerging self. Before a difficult conversation, you can rehearse, remaining calm. Before an interview, you can rehearse, listening before answering. Before competition, you can rehearse, returning attention to the present moment. Before entering an intimidating room, you can rehearse, curiosity instead of self-consciousness. Before beginning a new habit, you can rehearse the exact moment when you normally quit. That last one is especially important. Suppose you want to exercise every morning. Most people visualize the outcome, a healthier body, more energy, feeling proud. But that's not where the habit usually dies. The habit dies at 6:15 in the morning when the alarm rings. The room is comfortable, it's raining outside, and a voice whispers, "Tomorrow." That's the scene. You need to rehearse, see the alarm, feel the temptation to stay in bed. Hear the old sentence, "Just 10 more minutes." Then imagine your feet touching the floor, not dramatically, not heroically, simply automatically. Shoes, water, door, movement. Now you're rehearsing the decision point. And decision points are where identities are actually built. The same principle can transform emotional habits. Suppose you become angry when someone criticizes you. Don't only imagine yourself as a calm person. That's too abstract. Enter the theater. See the actual face. Hear the kind of sentence that normally triggers you. Feel the first wave of irritation. Then rehearse. The pause. One breath, perhaps two. Feel your jaw soften, your shoulders release. Hear yourself say, "I want to understand what you mean." Again. Run the scene. Again. Not because imagination guarantees that you'll respond perfectly, but because now the desired response is no longer completely unfamiliar. You've visited it before, and familiarity matters. Remember, the old identity survives partly because it knows the territory. Anger knows the root. Avoidance knows the root. Self-doubt knows the root. Procrastination knows the root. They have traveled those neural, emotional, behavioral roads many times. A new response may initially feel awkward, not because it is wrong, but because it is new. Mental rehearsal begins drawing a preliminary map. Modern research on mental imagery gives us a useful way to understand why this can matter. Imagining an action is not identical to physically performing it, but mental imagery can engage some overlapping brain processes involved in perception, planning, emotion, and movement. This is one reason mental practice has been studied in areas such as sport, music, motor learning, and performance. But notice the important word, practice. Mental rehearsal is not a replacement for real practice. A pianist cannot imagine for 10,000 hours and wake up able to play Rachmaninoff. An athlete cannot visualize strength instead of training the body. A leader cannot imagine difficult conversations and never actually have them. The theater prepares, reality trains, and transformation requires both. This protects us from one of the biggest misunderstandings around visualization. You are not trying to command reality. You're training your relationship with reality. You're not visualizing to guarantee that the client says yes. You're rehearsing who you will be, whether the answer is yes or no. You're not visualizing to guarantee victory. You're rehearsing focus, execution, and recovery. You're not imagining that nobody will criticize you. You're rehearsing the person who can hear criticism without losing themselves. That is far more powerful than fantasy. Now, let's actually enter the theater. Not metaphorically. Right now, if you're somewhere safe, where you can relax, allow your body to become a little more comfortable. You don't need to close your eyes, but if you want to, you can. Take one slow, comfortable breath, and another. Don't force relaxation. Simply notice that you can stop holding some of the tension you don't need right now. Perhaps your shoulders can soften slightly. Perhaps your jaw can loosen. Perhaps your hands can simply rest. And now, choose one situation, not your entire life. One situation that would matter if you handled it differently. A conversation, a meeting, a decision, a performance, a boundary, a habit. Choose one. Now imagine there is a screen in front of you. On that screen, you see the situation beginning. Where are you? Who is there? What can you hear? What normally happens? Don't change anything yet. Just observe the old movie. Notice the moment where the old pattern begins. Maybe someone says something. Maybe your phone appears. Maybe fear rises. Maybe you begin doubting. Maybe you feel rejected. Maybe you want to escape. Find the turning point. Now, stop the movie just there, because that moment is more important than the ending. That is the moment where the old self-image normally takes control. Now rewind a few seconds. Run the scene again. Same place, same people, same trigger. But this time, something changes. You, not dramatically. Perhaps you breathe. Perhaps you wait 3 seconds. Perhaps you straighten your posture. Perhaps you ask one better question. Perhaps you put the phone down. Perhaps you say no. Perhaps you stay. Perhaps you begin. Perhaps you simply refuse to tell yourself the old story. Notice what happens next. Now run it again. But this time, step inside the scene. Don't only watch yourself from the audience. See through your own eyes. Hear the sounds from where you're standing. Feel the floor beneath your feet. Notice your breathing. Feel what calmness might physically feel like. Not perfect calm. Enough calm to choose. Hear your own voice, maybe slower than usual. Feel yourself remaining present 1 second longer than the old version of you would have, and allow the scene to continue. Now introduce a complication. The person doesn't respond the way you hoped. The audience looks uncertain. The temptation becomes stronger. Someone challenges you. The first attempt doesn't work, and instead of allowing the movie to collapse, rehearse recovery. Breath, adjustment, correction. Remember, the servo-mechanism. Miss, correct, miss, correct. Continue. This is where the theater becomes training. Now finish the scene, not with applause, but with alignment. You behaved in a way you respect. Whatever the external outcome, you remained the person you intended to practice becoming. Stay there for just a moment. Let the mind notice what that feels like. Because perhaps this is not fantasy. Perhaps this is evidence being prepared before evidence exists. A possible response, becoming familiar enough to become available when you need it. Now open your eyes, if they were closed. And remember, the exercise isn't complete. The next step is reality. When the actual moment arrives, act, even imperfectly, because every real action gives the brain something imagination alone cannot provide. Feedback, the mental theater, introduces the possibility. Behavior tests it. Reality corrects it. Repetition strengthens it. And eventually, what once existed only on an internal screen can begin appearing in your actual life. But there is another reason this theater matters. Because not every movie playing inside your mind was written by you. Some scripts began long before you knew you were rehearsing them. A teacher said, "You'll never be good at this." A parent said, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Someone laughed when you spoke. Someone rejected you when you were vulnerable. Someone called you lazy, weak, average, difficult, awkward, stupid, selfish, or incapable. Maybe they said it once, maybe repeatedly, but the words entered the theater. Then, experience began providing images. The images created expectations. The expectations influenced behavior. And eventually, you stopped hearing someone else's voice. It began sounding like your own. That may be one of the most powerful forms of psychological conditioning. A suggestion becomes a conclusion. The conclusion becomes expectation. Expectation changes behavior. Behavior creates evidence. And evidence makes the original suggestion feel like truth. Years later, you say, "This is just who I am." But perhaps the most important question is, who told you? And even more importantly, why are they still allowed to direct the movie? Because before we can build a new self-image, there are some old suggestions we may finally need to stop obeying. Some of the most powerful hypnotic suggestions you will ever receive are never delivered inside a hypnosis room. They arrive casually at dinner tables, in classrooms, on playgrounds, during arguments, inside relationships, from teachers, from parents, from friends, from people who may not even remember what they said. You are shy. You are lazy. You are too emotional. You'll never make it. You're not leadership material. People like us don't do that. You're just not good enough. Sometimes the sentence is repeated. Sometimes it is spoken only once, but spoken at the wrong moment, with the right emotion. And emotion can make words stick. Imagine a child standing in front of the class. They forget one answer. Everyone laughs. The teacher says, "You never prepare properly." Maybe the teacher meant that one moment, but the child doesn't always hear a comment about preparation. The child may hear a definition. "I am the kind of person who gets things wrong." That sentence may never be spoken aloud, yet something inside begins forming. The next time the child has to speak, the body remembers. Slight tension, slight hesitation, a little fear. The performance becomes weaker. Another uncomfortable moment, another piece of evidence, and slowly, the sentence begins feeling true. This is how a suggestion can become a self-image. Suggestion, belief, expectation, behavior, evidence, and then stronger belief, around and around and around, until one day, the person no longer remembers where the sentence came from. They simply say, "This is me." But perhaps it was never you. Perhaps it was a conclusion formed under pressure, a conclusion formed before you had enough experience to question it, a conclusion that later became a prediction, and predictions change behavior. Imagine someone who was betrayed in an important relationship. The event hurts deeply, and somewhere inside, a conclusion appears. People cannot be trusted. At first, it sounds like protection. Don't trust too quickly. Stay careful. Stay safe. But over time, the protection becomes a filter. Every delay looks suspicious. Every silence looks dangerous. Every disagreement feels like betrayal beginning again. The person becomes guarded. The other person feels distance. Connection weakens. Then eventually, the relationship breaks, and the old belief says, "See, people cannot be trusted. The past has just recreated a version of itself." This is why the past can feel so powerful. Not because the past is still happening, but because its meaning may still be operating. And unless that meaning is examined, the nervous system can keep responding to today's world through yesterday's conclusion. Think about an old photograph. You look at it and recognize yourself. But would you wear the same clothes today? Would you speak exactly the same way? Would you make the same decisions? Would you think exactly the same thoughts? Probably not. Then why should an old psychological photograph still have the authority to define who you are now? The important distinction is this: an event is not an identity. A performance is not a personality. A mistake is not a destiny. A rejection is not a definition. A painful season is not a lifelong sentence. But human beings often merge what happened with who they are. And once merged, the event becomes psychologically permanent. Let's separate them carefully. Suppose you failed in business. The event is, the business failed. The interpretation might become, I am bad at business. The identity verdict might become, I am a failure. Three very different things. Only one is the event. The other two are conclusions, and conclusions can be examined. Suppose someone rejected you. The event, they chose not to continue. The interpretation, I wasn't enough. The identity verdict, I am not lovable. Again, one event, two layers added by meaning. And those layers can become heavier than the event itself. This does not mean pain wasn't real. It may have been. It does not mean something wrong didn't happen. It may have. It does not mean you should pretend everything was fine. No. Dehypnotizing yourself from the past is not denial. It is accuracy. It is the ability to say, that happened. But I do not have to become the permanent meaning I once attached to it. Imagine a courtroom. The case was heard 20 years ago. The evidence was incomplete. The judge was young. The witnesses were emotional. And yet, the verdict has never been reviewed. Every year, you keep living as though the case is permanently closed. What if it isn't? What if you are allowed to reopen the file? Ask yourself, what did I decide about myself because of what happened? Not what happened. What did I decide? Maybe I must never look weak. I must always please people. I must never depend on anyone. I must be perfect. I must always be in control. I should never speak too much. I should never trust. I am not intelligent. I am not attractive. I am not enough. These sentences often look like identity, but many of them began as strategies, ways to survive emotionally, ways to avoid more pain, ways to stay accepted, ways to stay safe. And this changes the conversation, because instead of attacking the old pattern, you can understand what it was trying to protect. Maybe perfectionism was protecting you from criticism. Maybe people-pleasing was protecting you from rejection. Maybe silence was protecting you from humiliation. Maybe anger was protecting you from vulnerability. Maybe emotional distance was protecting you from disappointment. A strategy can make sense when it begins. That does not mean it should remain in charge forever. Imagine wearing armor during a war. It keeps you alive. The war ends. Years pass, but you never take the armor off. At first, it protected you. Now, it makes it difficult to move, difficult to connect, difficult to rest, difficult to feel. The armor was not wrong. It simply outlived the situation that created it. Some identities are exactly like that. So the question is not, why was I like this? The better question may be, do I still need to be like this now? That word, now, is powerful because your nervous system may still be responding to an environment that no longer exists. You are not in that classroom. You are not in that childhood home. You are not inside that old relationship. You are not the same age. You do not have the same resources. You do not have the same understanding. You are here, now, and now has different options. Take one old label, only one, something you've said about yourself for years. I'm shy. I'm weak. I'm not disciplined. I'm not good with people. I'm bad with money. I'm not creative. I'm too emotional. Now, change the grammar, not the truth, the grammar. Instead of, I am shy, try, I learned to become quiet in certain situations. Notice the difference. I am bad with money becomes, I developed financial habits that haven't served me. I am not confident becomes, I have not yet built enough evidence of confidence in this area. I am lazy becomes, I often avoid tasks when they feel overwhelming or unclear. Suddenly, identity becomes pattern. Pattern becomes observable. And what is observable can be changed. This is why language matters. The words, I am, can turn a temporary experience into a permanent identity. Be careful what you place after them. I am a failure. I am anxious. I am unlucky. I am broken. Sometimes, a more accurate sentence returns possibility. I am experiencing fear. I made a mistake. I am learning. I am rebuilding. I am becoming more capable. One language closes the door. The other leaves it open. Now think about memory. Memory is not a perfect recording. Every time you revisit the past, you revisit an interpretation of the past. And sometimes you have been replaying the same version for so long that you forgot other evidence existed. The time you were courageous, the time you did speak, the time you did finish, the time you handled rejection, the time you started again, the time someone trusted you, the time you solved something difficult, the time you surprised yourself. Why did those moments never become identity? Why did failure get promoted while resilience remained an exception? Perhaps because your old self-image had already chosen what counted as evidence. And this is where we begin. Changing the evidence system, not by inventing fake success, by becoming more honest about the full record. Imagine your mind as an archive, thousands of moments stored inside. For years, you have been searching only one category. Proof I can't. What happens when you begin searching for another category? Proof I learned. Proof I adapted. Proof I survived. Proof I handled it. Proof I became better. The past does not change, but your relationship with the past can. There is another powerful question. Whose voice are you still hearing when you say, I'm not good enough? Whose voice does it sound like? A teacher? A parent? A former partner? A boss? A group you once wanted to belong to? Or perhaps the voice has been repeated so many times it now sounds like you. But borrowed voices do not deserve permanent authority. Imagine you receive a letter written 30 years ago. The instructions inside were correct for the person you were then. But would you automatically follow those instructions today? Of course not. You would ask, does this still apply? Do the same with old psychological instructions. Stay quiet. Don't take risks. Never trust. Don't stand out. Always prove yourself. Never make mistakes. Ask, does this still apply? Maybe. Some answer will be no. And sometimes, one honest no is enough to begin dismantling a 30-year-old identity. But remember, the old self-image may not disappear just because you understand it. Insight opens the door. Evidence walks through it. You may intellectually know, I am capable. Then the nervous system asks, show me. This is where real reconstruction begins. New interpretation, new rehearsal, new behavior, new evidence, again, 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 until the new picture begins feeling more familiar than the old one. And perhaps this is what freedom from the past really means. Not forgetting, not erasing, not pretending it never happened, but allowing what happened to become a chapter instead of the title of the entire book. The past can explain you. It does not have to command you. It can teach you. It does not have to name you. And once you truly understand that, a remarkable question becomes possible. If I am no longer required to remain loyal to an outdated picture of myself, then who do I choose to become now? And that is where rebuilding the self-image finally begins. So now, we arrive at the question everything else has been preparing us for. If your self-image was learned, can it be relearned? If an old identity was built through experience, interpretation, repetition, and evidence, can a new one be built the same way? The answer is not. Simply think positively, and it is certainly not. Stand in front of a mirror, repeat something you don't believe, and wait for reality to change. Rebuilding the self-image is much more honest than that. It begins with seeing clearly, then imagining deliberately, then behaving differently, then collecting evidence, again and again, until the picture begins changing. Imagine renovating an old house. You don't begin by choosing curtains. First, you inspect the structure. Where are the cracks? What is outdated? What is still strong? What needs removing? What needs rebuilding? Your identity deserves the same honesty. So take a moment and imagine that you are not judging yourself. You are simply studying yourself, like an architect looking at an old blueprint, and ask, what picture of myself am I currently carrying? Not, what person do I wish other people believed I was? The real picture. Complete these sentences silently. When things become difficult, when someone criticizes me, when I receive a big opportunity, when I fail, I tell myself. When I succeed, I tell myself. When I look at my future, I expect. When I think about myself, deep down, I believe. Don't rush, because sometimes the most important sentence is the one you don't want to admit. Maybe you discover, I expect things to go wrong. Maybe I need everyone to approve of me. Maybe I don't trust myself with big decisions. Maybe I can achieve, but I can't sustain. Maybe I always have to prove myself. Maybe I don't deserve to rest. Maybe I can help everyone else, but somehow not myself. Whatever emerges, remember, this is not a confession. It is a map. You cannot redesign what you refuse to locate. Now, the second step. Ask, where did this picture come from? Not because we need to blame someone. Blame keeps power in the past. Understanding brings power back to the present. Perhaps one teacher, one rejection, one repeated comparison, one parent who was trying to motivate you but used words your younger mind converted into identity. Perhaps there wasn't one event at all. Maybe it was 1,000 tiny moments. The important question is not only where did it come from, but does the conclusion still deserve to remain? Imagine discovering an old rule written inside your house. Never open this door. For 30 years, you obey it. Then one day, you ask, why? And someone says, oh, that was written decades ago because the lock was broken. The lock was repaired 25 years ago, but nobody removed the sign. Many psychological rules work exactly like that. Don't speak. Don't trust. Don't take risks. Don't stand out. Don't make mistakes. Always keep everyone happy. The original reason may no longer exist. The rule remains. So ask, what old rule am I still obeying after the danger has already passed? Now comes a crucial distinction. We are not going to destroy the old identity with violence. The goal is not to hate the person you used to be. That person may have done the best they could with the resources they had. You don't need to attack the old self. You need to update it, like software. You don't scream at version 1.0 because version 5.0 can do more. You appreciate what got you here and install what you need now. So now, we create the emerging self-image. Notice, I didn't say the perfect self. Perfect people don't exist. And psychologically, an impossible image creates distance rather than growth. Instead, ask, who am I becoming? Not, what do I want to own? Not, what title do I want? Who am I becoming? Perhaps calm under pressure, reliable, curious, healthy, courageous, financially responsible, emotionally available, disciplined, kind, without being weak, confident, without needing superiority, ambitious, without sacrificing peace. Choose 3 to 5 qualities, not 20. A self-image needs clarity. Now make those qualities behavioral, because confident is too abstract. How does confidence behave? On Tuesday morning, maybe confidence means I speak clearly, even when I don't know whether people will agree. Disciplined might mean I begin important work before I feel motivated. Calm might mean I create a pause between trigger and response. Healthy might mean I make decisions that respect my body even when nobody is watching. Leader might mean I take responsibility before I look for blame. Now, identity has behavior. And this is where the theater inside your mind returns. Take one of those qualities. Suppose you are becoming calm under pressure. Don't merely say, I am calm. Rehearse calmness inside pressure. See the difficult meeting. Hear the challenging tone. Feel the first physical reaction. Then experience the new response. Pause, breath, presence, a deliberate sentence. Run it again and again, not for hours. A few focused minutes. The purpose is familiarity. You're showing the nervous system another route. Suppose you are becoming someone who speaks confidently. Rehearse, not an imaginary standing ovation. Rehearse the difficult moment. Someone interrupts. Someone disagrees. You forget a word. Your heart beats faster. And yet, you remain. You breathe. You think. You continue. Why rehearse difficulty? Because the new identity must survive reality. Now comes, perhaps the most important part, evidence. Remember, the subconscious is not easily persuaded by speeches. It watches what you repeatedly do. So ask, what is the smallest behavior I could perform today that would provide evidence for this emerging identity? If the identity is, I am someone who keeps promises to myself, don't begin with 20 promises. Choose one, small, clear. Keep it. Tomorrow, keep it again. The action itself may look trivial, but psychologically, something important has happened. Evidence. Imagine a jar. Every evening, you place one small stone inside. One promise kept. One stone. One courageous conversation. One stone. 1 hour of focused work. One stone. One healthy choice. One stone. One moment where you caught the old pattern and chose differently. One stone. The first week, the jar looks almost empty. Months later, it becomes difficult to lift. Identity works through accumulation. This is why the person rebuilding self-image must learn to notice wins, not celebrate with arrogance. Record with accuracy. At night, ask, what evidence did I create today for the person I am becoming? Maybe I normally avoid conflict, but today I said what needed to be said respectfully. Evidence. I wanted to procrastinate, but began for 10 minutes. Evidence. I received criticism and didn't collapse. Evidence. I made a mistake without attacking myself. Evidence. I said no without writing a 5-page apology. Evidence. These moments are identity construction. But be careful. The old self-image may try to discount them. That was nothing. It was only once. Anyone could do that. Catch that sentence. Because the old identity is protecting its evidence monopoly. Respond, not with exaggeration, but accuracy. Yes, it was once, and once is now part of the record. That's enough. Now imagine what happens after 100 such moments. The mind has a problem. The old conclusion, I never do this, can no longer survive, unchallenged. Reality has become inconvenient for the old identity. And if you continue, something eventually changes. The new behavior stops feeling like an exception. It begins feeling like you. This is why consistency matters more than emotional intensity. One extraordinary weekend may inspire you. 50 ordinary days can educate your self-image. You don't need to feel transformed every morning. You need to create enough evidence that transformation becomes increasingly difficult to deny. Now, let's address mistakes. Because if you are rebuilding identity and you expect never to relapse, you've already designed a fragile system. You will drift. You will forget. You will react like the old version sometimes. The question is, what happens next? Suppose you're becoming someone who exercises regularly. You miss one day. The old identity says, there, we knew this wouldn't last. Don't argue. Don't panic. Simply return the next day. Why? Because the second action, after a mistake, may become more important than the mistake itself. It teaches missing once doesn't decide who we are. Returning is also part of who we are. That is a powerful identity. Imagine a professional tennis player. One poor shot doesn't require a new personality. It requires the next point. Your life deserves the same grace. The new self-image should not be, I never fail. make it. I respond intelligently when I fail. Not, I am never afraid, but I can move while fear is present. Not, I always know what to do, but I trust myself to learn and correct. These identities survive reality. Now let's bring the whole mechanism together. The old loop might have looked like this. Old self-image creates old expectation. Old expectation shapes attention. Attention shapes emotional state. State influences behavior. Behavior creates familiar evidence. Evidence strengthens the old self-image, a closed loop. But now we introduce something new, a consciously chosen image, a deliberately rehearsed response, a small new behavior, new evidence, then again, new image, new expectation, new behavior, new evidence, again and again, until the loop begins running in another direction. Think of two paths through a forest. The old path is wide. You have walked it for decades. The new path is barely visible. The first time you use it, branches resist, grass is high. It feels unnatural. Of course, the old path feels easier. Don't mistake ease for truth. It is simply well-traveled. Every time you choose the new route, the path becomes a little clearer. Meanwhile, the old path, if used less, gradually becomes less dominant, not erased, less automatic. This is why patience matters. Rebuild an identity is not an announcement, it is construction. You cannot post a new identity and assume the nervous system received the memo. You build it quietly, privately, repeatedly, especially when nobody is watching. There is another practice that can help. Every morning, before the day begins, ask 3 questions. Who am I practicing being today? Where will the old version probably appear? And what will I do when it does? Notice the third question. Not, will it appear? When you're expecting the old pattern without being controlled by it. Suppose, you become impatient during a particular meeting. Good. That's where practice happens. The meeting is no longer an inconvenience. It's your laboratory. Suppose, you reach for your phone whenever work becomes difficult. Good. That moment is the gym. Suppose, you become defensive when corrected. Good. That discomfort is where the new identity gets its evidence. Transformation becomes much more interesting when triggers stop being enemies and become training opportunities. Every trigger says, would you like to rehearse the old person or practice the new one? Now imagine 6 months of living this way, not perfectly, consciously. You have rehearsed the emergent identity, acted in alignment with it, recorded evidence, returned after mistakes, questioned old conclusions, allowed success to count. What happens? Maybe one morning, someone compliments you, and instead of saying, no, I'm really not that good, you simply say, thank you. Tiny moment, massive shift. Maybe you enter a room that once intimidated you and realize halfway through the conversation, you forgot to feel intimidated. Maybe someone criticizes you, and 3 hours later, you suddenly notice you haven't replayed it 40 times. Maybe you make a mistake, and the first sentence inside your mind is no longer, I'm such an idiot. It is, what needs correction? These moments may look ordinary, but they tell you the portrait is changing. Eventually, people around you may notice. You seem different. You're calmer. You're more confident. Something has changed. They see the external expression. You know, the real change happened earlier, inside. A picture became a possibility. The possibility became rehearsal. The rehearsal became behavior. The behavior became evidence. The evidence became identity. And identity began shaping a different life. But now we reach the final question. What happens when the new picture is no longer something you're trying to become? What happens when it begins feeling like the person you naturally are? When the old ceiling no longer feels like home? When success no longer creates discomfort? When your past remains part of your story without remaining the author? That is when the outer life can begin traveling into territory the old self could never imagine. And that is where this journey has been leading us. And now we return to the person you met at the very beginning, the person you could not outrun, the invisible portrait, the old picture, the conclusions, the labels, the limits, the familiar ceiling, the version of you that quietly decided what felt possible, what felt dangerous, what felt deserved, what felt normal. For years, you may have tried to change your life without changing. The person your mind believed was living it. And now, perhaps, you can see why so much effort felt like friction, because one part of you wanted a new future, while another part was still loyal to an old image. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not a physical mirror, an internal one. And for the first time, you do not ask, "Do I like what I see?" You ask, "Is this picture still accurate?" That question is very different, because maybe the picture was once useful. Maybe it was once protective. Maybe it helped you survive a particular season. But surviving and living are not the same thing. And an identity that helped you survive one chapter may quietly limit the next. Now imagine your future self 5 years from today. Not a fantasy, not an exaggerated version, not someone who never struggles, someone who simply stopped returning automatically to the old portrait, someone who learned to let new evidence count, someone who stopped turning mistakes into identity, someone who rehearsed resourcefulness instead of catastrophe, someone who allowed success to become familiar, someone who no longer needed to ask permission from the past before stepping into the future. Look at that person. How do they walk? How do they speak? How do they respond when something goes wrong? What do they no longer need to prove? What do they no longer need to fear? What do they no longer need to hide? And perhaps, most importantly, what feels normal to them now that once felt impossible? To you, maybe confidence feels normal. Maybe peace feels normal. Maybe responsibility feels normal. Maybe being seen feels normal. Maybe earning more feels normal. Maybe healthy love feels normal. Maybe speaking honestly feels normal. Maybe choosing yourself without guilt feels normal. Maybe finishing what you start feels normal. And the remarkable thing is, none of this had to begin with a dramatic transformation. It could begin with a new internal picture supported by one new response, one new choice, one new piece of evidence at a time. This is where something beautiful happens. The future self is no longer a stranger. You've rehearsed them. You've acted like them. You've collected evidence for them. You've returned after mistakes as them. And eventually, the person you were trying to become begins feeling less like a destination and more like home. Think about everything we've explored: the invisible portrait, the internal thermostat, the servo-mechanism, the power of feedback, the internal theater, the failure mechanism, the success mechanism, the old suggestions, the rebuilding. They were never separate ideas. They were all pointing toward one deeper truth. Your life is constantly being shaped by the relationship between the image you hold inside and the evidence you create outside. The inner picture influences behavior. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence updates the picture, and round, the system moves. This is also where the journey from atomic habits quietly connects with this one. Repeated behavior can become evidence for identity, and self-image can determine which behaviors feel natural enough to repeat. Outer repetition and inner identity are not enemies. They are partners. One teaches the mind through action. The other gives action a psychological home. And when both begin moving in the same direction, change becomes far more powerful. Perhaps this is why some people seem to transform without constant struggle. Not because they are more gifted, not because they discovered a magical technique, but because their inner picture and outer behavior stopped fighting with each other. Alignment replaced friction. Now, go back to one old sentence you have carried for years. Maybe I am not confident. Maybe I always fail. Maybe I am not enough. Maybe I am bad with people. Maybe I am not disciplined. Maybe I don't belong in bigger rooms. Whatever it is, don't argue with it. Don't shout over it. Don't pretend it never existed. Simply look at it and say, that was a conclusion, not destiny. A conclusion. And conclusions can be revised when new evidence arrives. Now ask one final question. What evidence would your future self begin collecting today? Not next month, today. What would one new response look like? One conversation, one decision, one boundary, one act of courage, one moment of self-respect, one behavior that quietly says, this is becoming who I am. That is enough for today. Because transformation does not require that you become the future self all at once. It requires that you stop automatically rehearsing the past self every time life gives you a choice. Imagine an old theater inside your mind. The screen has been playing the same movie for years. Same character, same limitations, same ending. And now, for the first time, the projector stops. Silence. The screen goes dark. No old story, no old verdict, no old prediction, just a blank screen. And in that silence, you realize something extraordinary. You are not the movie. You are not the old character. You are not the conclusion. You are the person who can now choose what gets rehearsed next. Maybe that is what freedom actually feels like. Not having no past, but no longer needing to repeat it. Not having no fear, but no longer allowing fear to write the script. Not having no mistakes, but no longer turning mistakes into identity. Not becoming someone completely different, but finally allowing more of who you could be to become psychologically possible. And maybe years from now, Someone will look at your life and say, "You changed." You'll smile because you'll know the change didn't begin when the world noticed. It began much earlier, in a private moment, when you questioned an old picture, when you stopped repeating one old sentence, when you allowed one new possibility, when you created one new piece of evidence, when you finally understood that your history could inform you without imprisoning you. Perhaps the greatest prison was never your circumstances. It was never the room, the relationship, the job, the money, the past. Perhaps the greatest prison was the picture hanging quietly inside your own mind with one simple label underneath it: me. And perhaps freedom begins the moment you realize a picture is not a person, a label is not a life, a conclusion is not a destiny, and your past does not get the final vote on who you become. So if there is one line I want you to carry from this entire journey, let it be this: your life rarely travels farther than the image you repeatedly hold of yourself. Change the image, create the evidence, allow the identity to catch up, and then keep moving. Because the life your old self could not see may already be waiting for the version of you that is finally ready to believe it belongs there.